Nice bruises, princess. Didn't know Fort Kessler had spa days. The voice sliced through the early morning haze like a dull blade. Private Wade Huxley smirked as he stepped back in line, loud enough to make sure everyone heard. That was the point. Sergeant Grace Mallory stood alone on the open training field, tank top soaked through with sweat, dust clinging to her skin like a second uniform. Bruises bloomed across her arms, down her collarbone. Not the kind that came from one bad day. These were the kind you earned slowly, the kind that lingered. Her knuckles were raw, her gait just slightly off, but her posture unshaken. Behind her, unit shifted. Some chuckled quietly. Others watched her with detached amusement. She was new here, technically the only female assigned to Bravo Squad in the last 2 years. No introduction, no backstory. All anyone knew was that she'd been transferred in on special directive, whatever that meant. Whispers had floated around the barracks the night before. Some said she was recovering from an injury. Others claimed she was just another paper pusher, trying to prove she could run with the grunts. Grace didn't say a word, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. That bothered Huxley more than he'd admit. How many push-ups does it take to snap a wrist, Sarge? He continued, flashing a lazy grin. Or did you trip over your own ego again? The others snickered. The kind of laughter that tests boundaries. None of them really knew her. And in the absence of truth, people get bold. What they didn't know, what none of them even considered, was that this woman didn't ask to come back. She volunteered, not because she needed redemption, but because she owed a debt only she understood. From a small rise just beyond the perimeter, General Thomas Barclay stood watching, hands behind his back, expression unreadable. He'd known the moment she stepped out of the Humvee that morning. This wouldn't be easy. Grace Mallory never sought attention. And yet, wherever she went, history followed. Still, he didn't intervene. Not yet. She stood in the heat, silent and still, while the bruises along her neck, half healed, still angry, caught the sun. She didn't defend herself. Didn't look away because Grace Mallory knew something the rest of them didn't. Respect earned in silence lasts longer than applause. She looked like someone who'd been through hell, and some of them were already betting she hadn't made it back. The scar beneath her left eye shimmered faintly in the morning sun, thin, uneven, almost surgical. Her shoulders were squared, but her stillness wasn't pride. It was something quiet or older. Then the general spoke, calm, controlled, dangerous. His voice carried across the field like a warning wrapped in gravel. Call sign Widow 27. Everything stopped. The laughter, the sideways glances, the smirks. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Private Huxley blinked, half confused, half annoyed. Widow what? General Barclay stepped off the rise, his boots meeting the dirt with a slow, measured rhythm, his arms no longer behind his back, now down at his sides, fists gently clenched. You just ran your mouth at Widow 27, son. The field didn't just go quiet. It tightened. Like every man standing had just been roped into something they didn't understand. Somewhere near the back, Private Keller, a kid from Arizona with 5 older brothers in the service, let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. No way, he whispered to himself. That's her. Next to him, another cadet's eyes widened. They'd heard the name in briefings and stories passed around like ghost tales during night watch. Widow 27 wasn't a soldier. She was a myth. A name whispered when talking about the worst deployment nightmares. A woman who went dark on comms for 5 days only to reemerge dragging a bleeding squad mate through enemy fire. But that was a legend, an exaggeration. It wasn't this woman, this bruised, silent figure standing in front of them with dust in her hair and blood still crusted on her collar. Was it? Barclay stopped just a few feet from Huxley, looking him over like a slow-forming storm. You don't need to understand what it means, he said, but you'd better damn well remember it. Behind Grace, one of the older instructors slowly stood at attention, not because protocol demanded it, but because something inside him said he should. And for the first time since she arrived, a shift rippled through the formation. Not just silence now, recognition. Have you ever heard of Operation Ghostline? Barclay's voice was calm. Too calm. Like the quiet right before something breaks. Private Huxley didn't answer at first. He was trying to gauge if this was still about him. But General Barclay wasn't looking for a debate. No, sir, Huxley finally muttered. The general turned just slightly. Not to Huxley now, but to the rest of them. To the field that had gone dead still. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For years ago, a 7-person recon unit was dropped behind the Lon Divide. Remote, cold, hostile. They were sent in to confirm intel on a weapons facility we weren't supposed to know existed. He paused. Not for effect, but because saying it still cost something. What should have taken 48 hours turned into 8 days. A few recruits shifted quietly. They were ambushed on day 2. 2 gone instantly. 1 bled out before sunrise. 1 vanished. Never recovered. That left 3. The wind picked up again gently, but no one moved. One had shrapnel embedded so deep in his chest he could barely breathe. Another, their comm specialist, was knocked unconscious in the blast. He let the silence settle, and the last she was shot through the thigh. 2 fractured ribs, no painkillers, no evac. Just 12 miles of ice and shadow between her and maybe survival. His eyes returned to Grace. She hadn't flinched, not once. She carried the comms guy on her back, dragged the wounded one on a makeshift sled rigged from broken pack straps and a snapped rifle barrel. No backup, no air support, just grit. The unit was silent. But Grace, she was somewhere else. Back then, there was no formation, no lines, no Huxley mouthing off. Just blood in the snow. Just the sound of her own breath getting shorter every hour. And a voice barely alive and behind her. If I pass out, don't stop. Just keep walking. She had even when her vision blurred. Even when she crawled the last 300 yards with him on her back. Because standing had stopped being an option. Now standing under the Wyoming sun, Grace's hands were clenched so tight her nails were digging into her palms. Not out of anger, but because even now, even here, the ghost hadn't let go. Barclay's voice cut through her memory. You think she came back for glory? He asked the unit, eyes scanning. She came back because not everyone who walks out of fire leaves the fire behind. And for the first time, even the boldest among them looked away. Because what they just heard wasn't a war story. It was a warning and a wound that never really closed. And for the first time, even the loudest ones lowered their eyes. Not in fear, not in guilt, but in something far more rare on a training field. Respect. Grace. Maulery stood motionless, hands behind her back, boots planted. The sun was higher now, catching the thin sheen of sweat on her neck. She still hadn't said a word, but the silence had shifted. This time, it didn't isolate her. It elevated her. General Barclay exhaled through his nose, slow and steady, as if settling something heavy on the ground. You think command sent her here? He scanned the formation again. Cadets now standing straighter, breathing slower. You think this was some reassignment, some favor, some pity transfer? Barclay took a few steps, pausing in front of the unit. Sergeant Grace Maulery had every right to walk away. She could have taken the discharge. She could have gone home with honors, with full clearance, and no one would have questioned it. A beat long enough for the weight of those words to drop, but she didn't. His voice sharpened, not louder, just firmer. She asked to come back. Several cadets shifted. Ree, the youngest, actually blinked like he'd misheard. Not to sit behind a desk, not to write reports or pose for recruitment posters. Barclay turned slightly, eyes landing back on Grace. She asked for the hardest assignment we have. Field instructor for pre-employment cadets. That means you. He didn't need to say the rest. Every person standing there now realized this wasn't some battered soldier trying to hang on. This was a leader who chose to come back to teach the next generation. Not with stories, but with scars. Barclay's tone softened, just a hair. She didn't return because she had to. She returned because she remembers what happens when training fails. No one spoke. No one needed to. Because sometimes leadership doesn't come wrapped in medals or fanfare. Sometimes it looks like a woman with bruised arms, a tight jaw, and fire in her silence. And in that moment, the squad no longer saw her as the one who got sent here. They saw her as exactly who she was. The one who volunteered. The one who endured. The one you shut your damn mouth and learned from. You've got one standing right in front of you. And you didn't even know it. General Barclay's words still echoed when Private Huxley walked off the field. Head down, shoulders low. No swagger left. Just silence following him like a long shadow. No one clapped. No one sneered. And that was louder than any noise. Later that evening, the mess hall buzzed in its usual quiet rhythm. Trays clattered, silverware scraped. But something had shifted. Nobody laughed too loud. Nobody filled the air with nonsense. And in the back corner at a table for 6, Sergeant Grace Mallery sat alone. Same posture, same silence, eating slowly, methodically, like someone who didn't expect company and didn't need it until one by one they came. No fanfare, no speeches, just quiet footsteps, quiet trays. A younger recruit sat down first, then another, and then 2 more. None of them said a word. Not sorry, not we were wrong. They just sat, ate, and every few moments their eyes glanced her way. Not with pity, not even with guilt, but with recognition. Because now they saw her. Not the bruises, not the silence, not the myth, but the woman who didn't break even when she had every excuse to. The soldier who didn't brag about war stories, didn't demand to be saluted, didn't need to be praised. She earned it quietly, brutally, completely. A few seats down, one of the newer recruits leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. Why, Widow 27? She didn't look up from her tray, didn't change expression. Because I've buried 26 of my team, she said, her voice even. I'm number 27. The table went still. No second question, no follow-up, just that. And the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Because no one at that table would ever forget what those words meant. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She wasn't there for medals or promotions or stories to tell around bonfires. She was there because that's what real leaders do. They come back even when it hurts. Even when they're broken. Even when the body wants to quit and the world says don't bother. They come back. So the next generation knows how to stand. Knows what strength really looks like. Because true strength doesn't wear a spotlight. It doesn't yell over the crowd. It doesn't need your applause. It bleeds in silence. It trains without praise. And it stares down cowards until they remember what the word respect actually means. That night, no one made a speech. No one told Grace, "Thank you." But they didn't have to. They showed up. They stayed. They listened, and for the first time since she'd returned to Fort Kessler, she didn't eat alone.